All right, let's dive in. What if I told you that the popular idea of a powerful, hidden genius inside your mind, your cognitive unconscious, might just be wrong? Today, we're going to explore a paper that makes exactly that case, with a fascinating theory called the self-organizing consciousness. You know the story we've all been told, right? That deep down inside our minds, there's this unconscious mastermind doing all the heavy lifting while we're not even looking. It's a really compelling idea, but what if it's not the whole story? Not even close.
So for decades, the standard view in psychology has been built on this very idea of a cognitive unconscious. It's kind of the default explanation for some of the most complex, amazing things our brains can do.
I mean, think about it. How do we explain all these mental feats? Learning your first language as a little kid, those sudden aha moments that come out of nowhere, or even just driving home on autopilot. The go-to explanation is almost always some brilliant unconscious process working behind the scenes.
The dominant framework really assumes our minds operate like a hidden factory, right? Using all these unconscious representations and secret rulebooks to perform complex calculations. And it's this exact idea that we are about to challenge.
But what if we don't actually need that hidden factory at all? This brings us to a radically simpler and maybe even more elegant idea. An alternative that puts our conscious experience right at the front and center of everything.
The central question this theory asks is simple, but it is profound. What if we don't need a super sophisticated unconscious mind to explain complex thought? What if our conscious experience, all by itself, is actually enough?
This quote from the source paper really gets to the heart of it. The theory, which they call self-organizing consciousness, or SOC, proposes that the only mental representations we ever create are the ones we are consciously experiencing right here in the moment. There's no hidden playground. What you see is what you get.
So here's how the two views stack up. The conventional view imagines this hidden factory in your mind, full of secret rules and hidden computations. But the SOC view sees it more like a self-organizing spotlight. The only real mental action is whatever is happening inside that spotlight of your awareness. The unconscious part isn't some second, smarter mind. It's just the physical neural machinery of the brain that keeps the lights on.
Okay, so you're probably thinking, if there are no unconscious rules, how on earth does consciousness learn anything? That's a great question. Let's look at a concrete example to see how it might work.
To really get our heads around this, the researchers built a computer model they called Parser, and its job is basically to do what a baby does, figure out where words begin and end in a continuous flow of sound. But, and this is the key, without any pre-programmed grammar rules.
So here's how it works. Parser hears a stream of sound, like pretty baby. Now, with no rules to follow, its attention just grabs random little chunks. But here's the magic. The chunks that happen to be real words, like baby, are going to naturally show up over and over again in language. The gibberish chunks, like Ediba, they won't. So through these very simple processes of repetition and, crucially, forgetting, all the gibberish just fades away and the meaningful words emerge all on their own. No hidden rules, just patterns that were already there in the data.
And this leads to a really mind-bending insight. What if the things we think of as our cognitive weaknesses, our limited attention span, the fact that we forget things, what if they aren't bugs at all? What if they are actually essential features? Forgetting is the filter. It's how consciousness automatically throws out all the random noise and locks onto the meaningful patterns that actually repeat in our world.
Okay, so this process works for finding words in a stream of sound. That's cool. But can it really scale up to explain more complex thought? Let's see how the model builds from here.
The classic challenge for any theory of learning is always syntax, right? How do we learn the rules of grammar if they aren't somehow hardwired into our minds from the start?
The SOC framework answers this with what's called a representation/computation trade-off. Now, the old way is computation heavy. It assumes the mind has this hidden grammar book that it's constantly using to calculate things. The SOC way is representation heavy. It says we don't learn abstract rules at all. Instead, our conscious mind just gets really familiar with massive, complex chunks of language, entire phrases and sentences, and we use those recurring patterns to guide our speech.
And what's really cool is that this single principle of self-organization could apply to just about everything. It's not just for words. It could be how we learn to see a chaotic visual world as a collection of distinct objects, how we map names onto those objects, and even how we spot abstract patterns. In every single case, it's just consciousness finding the stable, repeating units in our experience.
So, let's bring this all back home. What does this theory have to say about those skills that feel completely automatic?
You know, the ones we usually think are classic examples of the unconscious mind at work.
Take reading, for example. For an experienced reader, it feels totally effortless, completely automatic. Surely that has to be an unconscious process, right?
Well, the SOC framework offers a totally new definition. It says automaticity isn't unconscious processing. Instead, it's the incredibly fast, single-step retrieval of a highly learned, complex, conscious unit from memory. So, when you read a word, your brain isn't running some unconscious reading program in the background. It's just instantly retrieving the entire complex, conscious representation of that word that you've built up over years and years of practice. Skilled behavior isn't unconscious, it's just really, really efficient consciousness.
You know, the skepticism that's really driving this whole theory is captured perfectly in this thought. If the cognitive unconscious was as powerful as so many people claim, the evidence for it would be overwhelming. The effects would be so strong and so easy to replicate that there wouldn't even be a debate. The very fact that the research is so controversial suggests we might be looking in the wrong place entirely.
And that leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. We tend to downplay our conscious minds, don't we? We see them as just the tip of the iceberg. But what if consciousness isn't the tip? What if, through its incredible ability to self-organize, it's actually the whole show? Is it possible that your conscious mind is far more powerful and far more responsible for who you are than you've ever imagined?